To modern ears, Genesis 47 can be difficult to comprehend. This chapter tells us that the 7-year famine is truly taking everything from the land. The people of Egypt are starving. We find out that they have given all of their money and all of their livestock to be able to buy food from Pharaoh's storehouse, and now they have nothing. They now come to Joseph pleading for more sustenance, even offering up their very lands and their very bodies, referring to them as carcasses. The hard part is that Joseph agrees to the trade. The people will get grain and seed, but their land now belongs to the king, and they essentially are indebted to him. The famine has brought catastrophe upon the entire land, and one cannot help but wonder why Joseph didn't just allow the people to have food. Why not ration out all the food so that the people could just survive until the famine finished? Was there enough food for everyone to be able to eat and live? Lots of questions, but the answers are very few. With the difficulty acknowledged, there are 2 principles of interpretation that I want to mention to help us wrestle faithfully with this text. First, just because a Bible story says something occurred does not mean the Bible approves of what occurred. It can be easy to fall into the fallacy that because the Bible is God's word, everything that is said in the Bible is something that God affirms. This is just not the case. So, for example, remember back when Abram and Sarai forced Hagar to bear Abram a son. Nowhere in the text does it say that God approved or disapproved of it. But as the reader, we know that God would be against this because later on, God will say that the covenant will not go through Hagar and Ishmael, but instead through Sarai's son. They messed up in that moment. This leads me to the second principle of interpretation, remembering the audience. Thinking through how the audience would have understood the story helps us better understand what the Bible is affirming. Modern readers tend to neglect what the original audience would have thought about the stories. When we remember the original audience, though, we quickly realize that God is not for slavery. Genesis was written for people who endured slavery for centuries in Egypt, something that the very next book in the Bible will address head on. God heard the cry of his people enslaved by Egypt and delivers them from that bondage. So when a people who had endured harsh slavery read Genesis 47, they likely didn't take Joseph's actions as a good thing. Our questions remain, but we know for certain that God is not for slavery. So the question is, what is God for? And I think this chapter, though difficult, showcases that God's ways produce life. Amidst the famine, we get this shocking statement in Genesis 47, specifically in verse 27. The text says something like, Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the land given by Pharaoh, and they owned the land there. They were fruitful and they multiplied. The family that is in a relationship with the God of Abraham, as opposed to the God of the Nile or the God of the rain, they are the ones living and growing. This verse reminds us of Genesis 1 and the command that God gave to humanity to be fruitful and multiply. It reminds us that though famines produce death, God's ways are mightier and produce life. As new beginnings, each day we have the option to choose God's ways or the world's ways, to choose life or death. We get this opportunity to choose in every area of our lives, but can I highlight just one that we face on a daily basis? The book of James says that the tongue, our words, has the ability to lift up or to destroy. With the tongue, we are able to bless the Lord, the Father. And with it, we curse people made in his image. From the same mouth can come blessing and cursing. Let us use our speech to sow life today, Christians, and the people around us. Let's speak out of an abundance of grace and love rather than out of a famine of ruin. Through Jesus' words, a dead person came out of a tomb. May we be like Christ and speak words of life to our families, to our friends, to our coworkers, and to our neighbors. And two, in those moments, we see the word of life bring carcasses to abundance.